to the Soul Mirror. I'm your host, Shreya. Today we are joined by Gary Seidler and Sheri Laine, voice behind Immigrants Roads, where stories of movement, identity, and resilience come alive. Together, they explored that delicate balance between where we come from, where we arrive, and the conversation that can transform belonging into a shared human experience. Let's dive into the beauty and complexity of immigration identity and the courage to change narratives. So, welcome, Gary and Sherry. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Shreya, we're very happy to be here.
And also, what does belonging mean to you both in the context of immigration?
Well, from my point of view, let me just describe my own circumstance. I just passed my 80th birthday. I consider myself a citizen of the world, and I don't mean that in a sort of lofty way, but I don't belong in any one country. Born in Shanghai, China, circumstances are, of course, a different story. And then at 4 years old, my parents took with me to London, to the UK, where I hope we have some listeners. And my formative years were in the UK. And then when I turned 16, 17, my parents emigrated to Toronto, Canada. And so I then spent 15 years of my life in Canada, which was a very, very different experience, a good experience. And then many years later, um, actually in 1976, I immigrated, but it was my choice. For the very first time, I was moving to another country, and, and it was my choice. And I moved to the United States in 1976 as a 32-year-old young executive, and I started a publishing company that lasts to this day. And I am now at a stage in my life where I am writing my own book, and it really comes from the point of view of belonging everywhere, but not belonging anywhere, if that makes any sense. I'll leave it there.
Yes. And Sherry, do you want to say something on it?
Well, different than Gary, have never been a refugee or an immigrant. I am a third generation Californian, and I always lived in America until I didn't. And when one has a sense of belonging, they bring themselves wherever they are, because, wherever you go, that's where you are. But what we do to create belonging is we form communities. And we can form communities or tribes with people that are like-minded, or we ride the wave of exploration and let the universe lead. We put ourselves out there to go other places, and then we learn through belonging of our own growing of roots. So no matter where we are in the world, we can all have a belonging. But it's very important to find that place of self first.
Yes. And I think that perspective makes belonging feel less like a status to be granted and more like a shared space we co create.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And do you think belonging is something we create for ourselves or something society grants us?
Maybe a little bit of both. I
I
think
think
it
so.
depends on the people you meet in the space that you're in.
Yes, I would agree with that. It's a very individual thing, I think.
I think you're manifesting experiences through where you are, if you're being conscious.
Yes, that is so powerful. And also, what role do conversation, both personal and cultural, play in shaping immigrant identity?
Well, what I'd like to refer to is we just completed season one of a podcast of our own called Immigrants Road. And we're telling stories of individual immigrants from different parts of the world, and they're compelling stories, and they show the listener that we are so much more alike than not. And that, our perspective, at least from the United States point of view, is that the U.S. is a very, very young country. It's only coming up 250 years. Compared to many other parts of the world, that's U.S. is still a child in that sense. And what we're trying to suggest to people through the podcast is that we are all immigrants. We all come from someplace else. I'm speaking again from the U.S. perspective. And we're asking people to understand that we are no different from our neighbors, no matter what our color and what our ethnicity and what our language, we are all part of the human race. And by the way, in the US, we are all newcomers. We all come from someplace else. And so we're trying to shift because honestly, immigration and immigrants has become, again, from a U.S. perspective, and I think many other parts of the world, a very divisive term. Become a negative term.
It's
It's
a nasty
something,
word.
nothing is something to be feared. And, it makes no sense when you think of us all as human beings. And that's how we're trying with telling wonderful stories about individual immigrants who have come to America
To create.
a new life.
Yes, I think it's so striking, and it also reminds us that human connection builds bridges that policy can never do.
Exactly. So,
And I love that term, building bridges, because there's so
Yeah.
much viciousness. Rather than have that divisiveness, we build bridges so we can all walk back and forth freely.
but we have to talk to each other. We have to talk to each other because the situation, and forgive me for being political, but from the United States perspective, and again, I think in many other parts of the world, there's a direction that this civilization is going, which is, in our opinion, not a positive one. And so I think, people literally cannot speak to each other because the views have become so polarized. So what we're suggesting is, come on, people, realize we are all the same and we have to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. And thereby we have to speak to one another civilly and nonviolently.
And here's the thing, by doing so, you change your entire family's outcome. So rather than complaining about your life, you're able to empower your life because your kids realize and your family realizes that the people around you are there to support you in your highest being, in your highest self, and your highest life. They're not the other, they're the us. So, that's like united we stand. We stand together, shoulder to shoulder, creating a better life for all of us by our behavior to each other and how we behave in the world and what we create for ourselves energetically through good, healthy life.
And can a single conversation shift how a person feels about their place in a new country?
Well, don't forget words matter, right? Words matter. What you say, you manifest. If somebody says something to you that doesn't work for you, you have to cancel it and keep going on your path because you want to always be the person that thinks positive and manifests positive change by your thoughts. I think, who was that man that said, we are our minds. We think, oh, here we go. James Dillett Freeman. We think in secret and it comes to pass, for environment is but our looking glass. That's called from a wonderful book called As a Man Thinketh. And I think it was written in the 1960s, maybe even later.
Yes.
That's a powerful thing to live by, dear.
But, not but, and I would also add that manifestation. I was a publisher for over 40 years, and there were books not too long ago, very, very popular books still, on manifestation. And I think that, and the law of attraction, that line of belief. And the only thing I would like to add to this idea of manifestation is, from my experience, generally, you have to go for it.
Yeah.
I don't believe it comes to you.
Right.
You have to go for it.
It's like the helping hand is at the end of your own arm. The
Yeah.
universe can't reward you. You can't create unless you're willing to reach up for it and make it a reality. That's a very important piece. The action part to manifestation is super important.
Yes, that is so wonderful because I think it shows that transformation isn't always through grand gestures, but often through small human exchanges like talks and words. And also, immigration is often framed in terms of struggle. How do you bring stories of resilience and celebration into that narrative?
Well, here's the thing. Gary has a co-host on his program, and her name is Sharon Kwan, and she's a 32-year-old therapist, and she a social worker, and she works with immigrants specifically. And
South Korean
South Korean American immigrant. And her and Gary have a wonderful conversation about just that. They start talking about what it means emotionally to be an immigrant and how one has to go through the depths of loss, belonging, lack of support, abandonment, leaving behind, accepting the angels, and knowing how much of a slog it is to create anew, but yet still doing it because they're in a different country, so they don't have their community.
And I really hope that perhaps your listeners will give a listen to Immigrants Road because Sharon, I mean, people would ask, what's 82-year-old world citizen doing talking with a 32-year-old Korean American? And it's kind of an interesting story how we came together quite by chance. And decided to do this series on the challenges that immigrants have faced. And it really deals with all the subjects that we are here talking to you about today.
Really interesting people from all walks of life and what their story is and what they have to say. And there's some really wonderful ahas there because, in order to produce something new, you have to be putting yourself out to do something new.
Yes, and I would definitely recommend all my listeners to go and listen to the podcast, and I too gonna listen to this podcast.
And yes, please. And then, if you love it, you can leave a comment or get in touch because we really want to know for you what that looks like to have heard that and had that experience or had a big aha around an experience that you could do to open yourself up to a new life or knowing a human being who created a new life for themselves. And it's all done energetically and with passion and putting one foot in front of the other. And how do you create that in your own life, even if you're not an immigrant?
There are so many examples in terms of acts of kindness that we can all do for one another that do not take a lot of resources, either money or time. Just, having an engaging smile, when you're in the grocery store, or if you're in a position to buy a meal for a family that is hurting. I mean, there are so many acts of kindness that would help change the conversation. And again, from an USA perspective, realizing that we're such a young country, we are, trying to get people to be curious about their own immigration journey by asking, what's your number? How many generations do you go back?
Where'd your grandmother grow up?
And get folks to be curious so they can engage with one another. And it can be a very interesting and powerful conversation.
We have somebody that we know that lives in Australia, and she has a group, and they started talking about their own stories. And she called us and told us, my God, you would not believe what I learned about somebody that I'd known for 5 or 6 years. And their immigration experience with their family is incredible. I would have never known that if I didn't get curious and have a conversation with somebody.
Yes. And I think that reframing is so important and it widens the lens from survival to thriving and showing immigrants as contributors of joy, creativity, and strength. And also on your journey, what personal experiences have most shifted your perspective on identity and home?
Identity and home.
Identity and home. Well, as I said earlier, because of my own immigration journey, as a young child, twice, from Shanghai to England and then from England to Canada. And I was, in both situations, taken by my parents, obviously, as a child. So I really was not happy to be where I was being brought because I was, missing what I had left behind in terms of childhood friends, etc. But when I had the opportunity to go from Canada to the United States to start my own business and company, I felt very, very free to be able to really step into my own being. So, although I have not quite experienced, coming for a family dinner, let's say on Thanksgiving, that wonderful emotional feeling of, oh, I'm home now. I don't have that experience because I don't feel American, I don't feel Canadian, I don't feel British, but I'm comfortable everywhere. So it's kind of a bittersweet, if that makes sense.
Although I do think that Gary has found home everywhere he's at. Like, he might not have that, oh, this is my home Thanksgiving experience, but he has wonderful Thanksgiving experiences where he can say, this is a wonderful experience in this home at this time with these people. You make home where you are, always.
True, true. And I think your story shows how identity isn't a destination, but a journey that is constantly shaped by where we have been and where we are going on. And if you could change one conversation happening around immigration today, what would it be?
Realize we are all the same. We are human beings.
And my change in conversation would be, these are people just like you. Everybody's a bad person. We all have the same hopes, dreams, and desires as the person that's looking next to you, whether they're an immigrant or not. Every family that you know has a challenge, and we're human consciousness. And the sooner we begin to understand, the sooner we're going to be able to heal our planet.
And I would only add, they is us.
That is so empowering. And what practical step can each of us take to start that conversation differently in our daily lives?
Well, as I suggested earlier, just bring compassion into your heart. And when you next have an opportunity to be gracious, to be kind, to be polite, to reach out in some fashion to a newcomer, that would be a very, very wonderful first step.
And for me, I would say get curious. Get curious in your own life. If you can't travel, read about travel. If you can't go to the bookstore and buy books about interesting things in the world, then go to the library and have conversations with other people so that you can grow mentally and spiritually. And that will make you a better, well-rounded person. I have a book called Living the Energy Connection. And my last chapter is becoming more round. Round yourself out as a human being, learn more things. The world is full of experiences if you can travel, if you can't learn about travel. Do art, exercise, eat healthy, eat foods from other cultures, listen to music from other cultures, grow as a human being.
Yes, that feels like the heart of it. And this is a wonderful conversation with you both. And thank you so much for reminding us that immigration is about belonging, resilience, and shared humanity. And if after this my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
Well, we mentioned immigrants, apostrophe S, Immigrants Road. And the episodes that I mentioned are now streaming wherever you get your podcast.
And we have a Instagram, immigrants, and then down. It's not the dash; it's the down dash road, and they can find us on Immigrants Road. Also under Gary Seidler, Seidler. He's on Facebook. I think he's on Instagram as well. If you put in Gary Seidler,
TikTok and
TikTok, he's on TikTok.
Substack.
Yeah, Immigrants Road. There's something you can find us. We're around.
Yes, and I will make sure to attach all these details and links below so that the listeners can find them easily and get in touch with you and know more from you because you two are really wonderful person and what you are doing is absolutely amazing. And To all my listeners, this has been such a rich dialogue with Gary Seidler and Sheri Laine, reminding us that immigration is not just about movement, it's about meaning, belonging, and the courage to reshape conversations. If today's episode sparked a thought in you, carry it forward. Listen differently, speak with intention, and create space for stories that heal and connect. Until next time, keep reflecting the soul of humanity in every conversation you hold. Thank you.